tell me what you think is going on in the picture behind me. This is a snapshot of a Zoom meeting. So what do you think? What do you think's going on? The one hint I have is this could be a management issue. And if you guys answer that and would help me out here, I'd like to know who my audience is today, if I have more newer teachers or returning teachers. So if you wouldn't mind in the chat also telling me if you're new to PLI or if you've been here before and are returning, if you could let me know that too, that will help me out. Great. Yeah, I know that this session is was suggested for more returning teachers, but that it's really free for anyone to come. So I just wanted to check. Okay. Second year at PLI, okay. Okay, so I haven't had everyone respond to my bell ringer here, so if you'll just take a minute, if you haven't already, what do you think is happening in this picture behind me? It could be something that I would need to have some type of management intervention with. So most of you so far are not new to PLI, but there are a couple of you that are. Marta, you are right on. And a few of you others shared. It is, in fact, some type of interruption, right? Marta said, kids crashing your meeting. So I am meeting with one of them. Okay, and by the way, I do have full permission from these two to have them up here. These are actually my nieces, and I did a mock little Zoom meeting with them. And over here, the one that's not looking very amused is the one that I'm meeting with. And then this one is her sister, and she is interrupting the Zoom meeting, right? And this is something that we could be facing this year, having students learn virtually but from home. Okay, in years past, this hasn't been the case for the most part. We are teaching from home, but we are teaching to students in a school. And so this is a very real possibility this year that we'll have to deal with students at home and then the interruptions that could take place. Okay, and so we were having a little fun with this, but it is actually a very real thing about what we need to prepare ourselves for this year. So I want to welcome you guys to this classroom management lab. I'm glancing at the chat a little bit to kind of see how much experience you have with PLI, with teaching in general, because even if we're new to PLI, we definitely aren't new to teaching. Oh, Laura, no. Yes, so those of us that were with PLI last year probably experienced this the last couple of months of school, not just siblings interrupting, but I had, parents talking on the phone in the background and things like that. So I want to welcome you, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you here and tell you a little bit about myself. So bear with me while I get that up. You guys having a good week so far and learning lots of new or relearning information?
Yes, it's been great.
That's great. And as you guys can see, I muted all of you. And for those that are returning, that's definitely a strategy that I use when I start a new class is I start everyone on mute. And then for you, you may unmute yourself at any time. If you have a question or need to say something, you can either put it in the chat or you can unmute yourself. For students, however, I have a different strategy, so we'll talk about that. But just to give you guys a little bit of background about me, you may have seen me in a meeting. This is my first time teaching a class, so you may not have seen me teaching a class. So I wanted to give you a little background information. I am teaching with PLI. This is my third year coming to teach at PLI. I started in February 2019, so I started in the middle of a school year, and I taught for that half the year. Then I taught a full year last year, and then now this is my third year teaching. But my background is in elementary, second grade. I taught first grade 1 year and kindergarten 1 year, but second grade was kind of the heart and soul of my teaching experience. And then I moved from Colorado. So I did my teaching in Colorado in the brick and mortar schools. And that's where I'm from. And then about 4 years ago, I moved to Texas because my husband is a head football coach in Texas. And if you know anything about Texas and football, that really drives every decision that you make for your family. And so we are now here in Fort Worth, Texas, and I wanted to take some time off of teaching to start a family and to adjust to my new family. And so after a couple of years of taking time off, I wanted to teach again. I was really missing that piece. And that is where PLI came into my life. And I have found that I can balance both staying at home and teaching. And so I teach 6th grade earth science right now. I'm qualified to teach elementary pre-K through 6th grade. But I've been teaching 6th grade earth science so far since I've been here. And of course, I wanted to show you a picture of my family. I'm so proud that I have 2 wonderful stepdaughters, age 17 and 8, and then a sassy 2.5-year-old that pretty much runs the family. And if you have a 2-year-old, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But I am excited to be here. So thank you for coming to this session. And Cindy Ivy is, I believe she is going to be my kind of my moderator for comments. Is that correct, Cindy? And so if you guys have questions today and they don't get answered, I will post a link at the end in the comments for you guys to post those questions, and we'll make sure and get to them, because an hour seems like a long time, or 55 minutes, but it really isn't. So we'll see how we do. I wanted to bring up our PLI mission statement before I get started, because many of you that are returning know that they revised it. And I think it's important to know that everything that we do and everything that we teach comes back to that. And so it is connect all learners with expert teachers they deserve. And in order to be an expert teacher, you need to have some classroom management tools that are effective for you so that we can give them what they deserve. So here's why we're here today. We have several tools that we can use in Zoom to help with our management. And my first class, I had mainly new teachers. And so for this class, I'm gonna go over everything, and then if we have time, I'm hoping we can go out in some breakout rooms and do some scenario talk. But I want to go over each of these that I have listed in front of you, and feel free to chime in if there's something I'm missing or if you have other ideas. But these are some tools that have worked for me in my classroom. And so the first one I'll start with is manage participants. Managing participants is really key in terms of when you start out your class. You want to pull that up and have that in front of you right away. And I'm not going to assume everyone in here is our returning teachers, so I'm going to kind of speak to everyone, new and returning. And so if you don't know where the participants tab is, it's in your toolbar. You're going to pull it up at the beginning of class. And then you'll see who signs in. You'll see that they're in the waiting room and you need to let them in. And you'll see at the very bottom of your participants tab, it says mute all, okay? And then it will tell you mute all, and then it will allow you to let them unmute themselves or mute themselves. The teacher has to unmute them. When I first started, I love the idea of having the same type of interaction virtually as in person, which means they are free to talk to you and have that kind of openness right from the beginning. And I quickly learned that that was going to need to change fast in terms of virtual teaching. When I allowed the students to come into class and speak freely, it was kind of chaotic, to be honest with you. And there's a lot of background noise and some interrupting, some students testing boundaries, and it was just overall not very productive. And so after taking some classes and watching other teachers at PLI, I agreed that really when they come into class, you want to have them muted. It sets you up for success. It sets them up for success. It is peaceful when they come in. Now, when I hit mute all, that does not mute me. Okay, so the teacher is able to speak, but you want them to come in and then they can say hello to you in the chat. And you want to have control over when they speak out or not. And again, this is just from my experience. And so I don't allow them to unmute themselves. I am the moderator of that. So when we're having a discussion, I want them to either raise their hand virtually and I will unmute them. They can tell me in the chat if I can unmute them. But it's important that we kind of control that type of loudness, so to speak, within your classroom. And so that has worked wonders for me to kind of have that control over mute and unmute. And there are students that will say, please, can you unmute us? We've been really good. And it just didn't work for me. I've tried it a few times and it just has never worked. I value them talking. That is very important. I just want to have a little more control over that. And so that is in the manage participant section. The chat, okay? The chat is another tool that I want to have a little more control over. I want them to be able to speak freely in the chat, but it needs to be purposeful, productive, and setting us up for success. And so until this year, I just allowed them to say hi in the chat and talk to me and talk to each other. And it got to a point where it created a lot of behavior issues. I had students that weren't taking it seriously and were spamming the chat box, just putting random letters in, or they were having side conversations with their friends while I was talking. And it created kind of a management nightmare. And so again, after trial and error and after a little while, I realized it is very beneficial to put it on host only. And so for the chat, that's personally what I do, and I know many other teachers do that, is they come right in and it's only going to me. Now, I still will say things like when I read the messages, if I feel like it would be of value for the whole class to hear, I will shout out to that student and say their name and agree with them and contribute what they have to say in the chat to the conversation. So I'm kind of the go-between and the one driving it, and they just put it in chat. It's kind of like getting approved before before it goes out there. And there are teachers that might have success differently, and maybe at the high school level, after you've trusted the kids a little bit longer and you've had more time to get to know them. But I know for middle school, it made things flow in class a lot better. And so if they spam me when it's private, or they say things inappropriately, it just goes to me, and that way I don't have to worry about the rest of the class. And I can ignore it because it's just coming to me. And so do you guys have any questions? I went over those two things. If you do, you can either unmute yourself right now or you can put it into the chat and I'll hopefully get to it.
Yes, how do you change to host only?
So when you sign into your class, you are going to be the host. So
Yes.
right now I am the host, and I could make you a co-host, but that's really under my control. But when you are actually the teacher signing into your class, you will just automatically be the host.
Oh, and they can't chat?
They can. So just like you can to me now, you're not the host. So that's the thing. I have different privileges because I'm the host. So I can control those things. I can shut the mute, or I can turn on and off the mute and the chat. You cannot right now because you're not a host. So you're technically a student. So you don't have those abilities right now. But
Okay.
when you sign into your actual class this year, you will have the same privileges that I have right now. You're automatically set up to be the host.
Okay. And if I'm the host, they can't do the mute. I mean, they
No,
can't do the chat.
they can't control that. The students can't control that, just the host.
Okay. All
Does
right.
that help?
I think so. I just really want to be sure how I go in and make sure they can't chat from the very beginning.
Yes, so you know what, as soon as I go in, here's what I do when I first start. I sign in, I pull up my participants tab right away and put it on my second screen. I pull up my chat right away and pull it up on my second screen. And I mute them right away before they even sign in, and I control the chat before they sign in. So that's why signing in 5 minutes before they do is beneficial, because you can kind of set yourself up right from the beginning so that when
Okay.
they do come in, you're already set.
Okay. All
Okay.
right.
Um, and so then we have whiteboard and annotation. Those are great tools for learning, but you definitely also want to manage that. You know, when you share your screen, you can share a whiteboard instead of your desktop. And you might do that if you want to interact more with your students. And you can annotate, but you can also give your students the ability to annotate also. And so if you don't want that, so there's a way for you to disable them annotating. And so you kind of want to control that. So the annotate tool is in the toolbar with everything else. It says annotate. And when you click on it as the host, um, I can draw. I can, do some different things. I can do math problems. It's really whatever you would do with a whiteboard. Now, I'm annotating, but I don't want my students to be able to do it also, because they can unless I disable it. And so if you go to your toolbar on the very right hand side, it should say more. Okay, and there's three little dots and it says more, and then you go and it says disable attendee annotation. Okay, and you're going to click on that and that will disable them from being able to do that. Okay, but there are times when I might want a student to annotate. I might want a student to participate, and so I'm going to enable them to do that. But I want to know who they are, because I want the accountability factor of knowing that if they do the right thing, I know who they are, but also if they do the wrong thing, if they're being inappropriate. So you also have the tool on the more section to say show names of annotators. Okay, so that's a little tool to help you so that you can see who is actually writing on the whiteboard. And if anybody has any comments, I haven't needed to use this tool very much. It's just nice to know that I have it so that I can kind of manage what kids are doing what. Yes, and staying on task. Um, uh, and then there's the sharing screen feature. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that, but um, it's a it's a feature that I only really do. I don't typically have my students share screens, so I want to disable that. I don't want them to be able to share screen. Now, if you have a student doing a presentation and you've spotlighted them and they have a screen to share, then that's that's you managing your class and you having control over that. But on a typical basis, I don't want them to just be able to share screens randomly. And I'm trying to remember, it's been a little while since I've used that feature, so maybe Cindy can pop in if she remembers how to stop kids from sharing screens.
Um, if you have a student that's sharing, if you click beside the share screen, there's a little green arrow, and you can click there for advanced sharing options, and you can edit what you want it to be allowed.
Yeah, that topic I didn't bring up in the last class, so I wasn't prepared. I'm stopping my share right now for a second just so I can look at my share screen. Okay, so
If you'll let me do it for just
yeah, sure,
um,
absolutely.
so you can see on my screen where to click it. It's right here, and you just click advanced sharing options, and then you'll get this menu, and you can I think that it might be something that you'd have to ask the admin team to modify, but this is where it would be. And so if you have a student, it's permanently set up to where you can interrupt their sharing by sharing yourself. So when only you can start sharing something else if a student shares something that is inappropriate.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Another thing too, Eleanor's earlier question about editing the chat, it's these three little dots right here beside the chat where you can make it host only. I think that's what she wanted to know.
Yes.
Okay. All right, back to you. Back to you in
It's
the
okay.
studio.
Thank you. So now I'll share mine again. And then I'm not sure what happens whenever I unshare my screen, I lose my PowerPoint. This happened the last class. And so sometimes we're going to fumble.
Click on the internet and it'll pop it back up.
Okay. There we go. Can you guys see this or no?
You stop sharing your screen.
Okay. Let me get back to sharing it. There we go. Okay. And so then after sharing screen, one tool that I'm really excited to do better at this year is breakout rooms. And if you've noticed in our meetings this week, we've used them quite a bit. And I personally, as a 6th grade science teacher, I haven't used them. And I think it was more out of fear of the unknown of how to manage that. But I've learned a lot more about breakout rooms this year and the value of how you can use them to differentiate instruction. And so that's going to be something that PLI really values and really kind of expects their teachers to play with and practice this year. And I can tell you, I'm already thinking about how I can do that in my science classes, and I don't know why I didn't think about that before. But when you're doing group projects or when you're doing small group work, it's great for that kind of breaking things down and being able to communicate things more effectively with your students. But another tool that I can picture using breakout rooms for is management in terms of behavior. There are times when I've wanted to talk to students more one-on-one, and that was one piece that was always missing, was how I can do that when I was broadcast in front of the class and the whole class could hear me. So if I have some repeat offenders of turning in work late and I want to have some private conversations with them, not just over email or chat, I could potentially create a breakout room where I can just talk to those 3 or 4 kids that are constantly turning work in late. And I could do one at a time or talk to them in a small group. Another way that I could use a breakout room is if you have a student that you just really need to talk to about their behavior. It's unacceptable, it's happened many times, and you don't want to broadcast that in front of the whole class, rightfully so. And so I would create a breakout room where I would handle them one-on-one, and you could always have your TA involved in that, but you could record the session to make sure that you're not just to hold yourself accountable. I always like to have another adult in the room if you're talking to a student about behavior. And if you can't have another adult recording, it just kind of helps that. And I don't know, I haven't used that, and I haven't used a breakout room for that, but now that I'm feeling more comfortable with breakout rooms and I'm understanding the purpose of them, I'm excited to have more quality conversations with my students, either for purposeful instruction or for behavior management. So breakout rooms are kind of a hot topic this year. So is there anyone that wants to share or have a question about that?
Hi, Gina, I have a question.
Yeah.
I actually just put it in chat. So I've used the breakout rooms and I've been trying to use them for partner talk and small group talk. The
Yeah.
problem is that I can't figure out, like, it'll randomly assign them to a group.
Yes.
And then it keeps doing the same groups. Is there a way to like switch it so they're talking to different people each time?
So it depends on the purpose. So far, the only times that I've used breakout rooms, I've just had it automatically assigned, so I haven't had control over who goes in what group. But when I go back to the, like I might, let's say I break out the class in a small group and they have something to talk about, and then I bring them all back and we talk again as a whole group. And then when I go to break them out again, they're going to be randomly shuffled again with different kids. Because I hit automatically, so they would go back with a different group. But if I want to have control over having the same kids in the group or having the same each time, I would hit the manual button when you're breaking them out so I can manually put them in the same group. If I don't care and it can be jumbled every time, I would just hit automatically and then it would go back. Does that make sense, or
Yeah,
am
that
I?
makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? And feel free. I know that one thing that I've learned as a virtual teacher, more introverted people and students, they thrive in the chat. Okay, so they are going to feel more comfortable in the chat, and more extroverted students you'll find will want to have you unmute them more and to speak. And so I see a purpose in both. I know that I was more introverted as a younger child and I never participated in class. And so if I had the chat feature, so I couldn't be seen but still be able to communicate, I think I would have thrived. So I just wanted you to know that when you have students this year, you're going to have both, and that's perfectly fine. So let me check on time really quick. The last class, I wasn't able, I didn't speak about polling. I wasn't planning on talking much about polling. I had several questions about it in the last class, but I might not since more of you are coming back. For some reason, it is not showing up on my toolbar, but it should. But it hasn't today. So I don't know if it'll be different when we start the school year. But if you've never done polling before, it's not necessarily a strategy for classroom management. It's a strategy that you can use for instruction. And I found it to be a good Zoom tool to use occasionally, maybe as a bell ringer or as an exit ticket of some sort. If you want to gather information from a class, or you want to do a getting to know you activity about polling. If you're doing a graphing assignment, you're gathering data. But polling is a great quick little tool that you can use in Zoom for that purpose. And so when it is available, it should be on your toolbar. And I click on polling, and then a little thing will come up where I type in the question that I want and the answer, and then I launch it, and it will automatically go into their kind of screen. Okay, but I don't see it on my toolbar, and I was with another VP earlier and she couldn't find it either. So I really don't have anything else to share with that other than look for it on your toolbar. And if you ever want to use it, I maybe used it maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks, as just, I try to change things up with my bell ringers and have different things. And polling is really fun at the beginning of the year when you want to get to know them, and they see the results, so they can see, like, I might say beach or mountains, and then they have to answer. And so you kind of have fun with like little getting to know you questions, and then they see the little poll go up or down. So I just wanted to mention that today, but it's not really a management issue. It's just an instructional tool.
I have Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go
I just
ahead.
had a quick question. Um, I don't think I've successfully implemented on the management of time for the bell ringers. And I always say it's, from brick and mortar is 3 to 4 minutes. And because of the students logging on at different intervals,
Hmm.
and I'm wondering if you have any suggestions.
Yeah,
They tend to stretch and drag on, eating up
yeah,
time for other
yeah,
activities. And
yeah.
so I just have tried different things, but the outcome still is the same. I just have students either not logging on
Hmm.
time, and it just creates a lot of disruptions.
I'll speak from my experience and then other teachers can chime in if they have other things to share. But I really think of a bell ringer as kind of you break the ice of waiting for students to sign in. But I do have kind of a hard line that I draw as far as when I start my instruction. So right when class starts, I have the bell ringer up. And then 5 minutes after class starts, I stop. No matter who has answered the bell ringer or not, the purpose of it is not so much to gather data for my instruction. It's just to kind of warm them up and get them into class. And you might have a third of the kids that participated and then the rest of them, they were late and they missed it. But it's kind of a way for you to give them a little time to sign in and say hello. You might need to take attendance and a warm up. And then 5 minutes after class starts, whoever is signed in, I'm getting started with my class. And so does that help, or does anyone else have anything to chime in with that about?
I agree. And sometimes if it's a bell ringer that you really wanted them to answer, you might create it in Google Forms and you can send them the
Mhm.
link. And those who
Yes.
are late, they can still fill it out. Or you can put it in the chat and they
Hmm.
can private message the answer to you or however you want to do it. So those are some other options.
Absolutely. Yep. And I do a little getting to know you survey at the beginning of the year, and that was something I had as a bell ringer um, for them to go onto a Google form. And then I keep track of my bell ringers, but I typically, it's more of a kind of a getting warmed up for the day. I don't put a lot of time into worrying about if every student does it, if that makes sense. Um, so I am going to go on to the next part. And I think we'll have time for this. We're gonna break out into breakout rooms. What I will say, I'm gonna give you the instruction and kind of the goal, but I may not get around to every single breakout room. I found in the last group, I just wasn't able to get around, but I am gonna give you kind of a purpose, what I'd like you to discuss, and then we will come back as a whole group to kind of debrief and finish off the day. But there are, I picked 4 things that could happen. Um, there are more things that could happen, but these are kind of what has happened the most with me. So if a student's being loud or not listening or talking inappropriately, how would you handle that? A student spamming your chat box. And I've talked a little bit about this, so I want you to kind of think about the tools you've used or have learned about today. A new one we're going to be faced with is, students at home, pets, siblings, other people interrupting. And then we have students that might figure out how they can change their name. How do you handle that? Okay, so I'm going to ask you to get into your breakout groups. When you do, I'm gonna have about five or six people in a breakout group. And then I want you to think about one of these 4, okay? So I'm not gonna assign one to each group. I want you to kind of either take a screenshot of this or write it down or just remember it in your mind, what these 4 scenarios. And then when you get into your group, you're going to think about what Zoom tools you could use for those scenarios. Okay, and you can just pick one scenario. You don't have to pick all 4. I want you to think about what expectations you could have set in place right from the beginning that could prevent these things from happening. And then what if you use these tools and the student is still not listening? Okay, so I want you to think about these 3 things as you get into your breakout groups. If you would appoint a spokesperson for your group, but I will say we might not get to every group when we're speaking, but I would like you to just be prepared to kind of share out some of the things that you talked about. And then I'll be going back and forth between as many breakout groups as I can. So are there any questions before I break you guys out? I'll put these 4 scenarios back up on the screen here for you to kind of look at before I break you guys out. Okay. So if there are no questions, I'll go ahead and get started, and we'll see you guys back here in the whole in our main session here in just a little bit. Hang on just a second. Welcome back, guys. Just waiting for everyone to get back from their breakout rooms. All right, so we are starting back as a whole group, and I know with breakout sessions, that's a little tricky because I control when you guys come back, and sometimes you're in the middle of conversation and it just says you're moving back to the main room. And so that just, it happens unfortunately. In a face-to-face setting, you know, I would be walking around the room and I would kind of gauge like, okay, they're ready to come back as a whole group. And that's not always the case in a virtual setting. So I usually would tell my students, you know, we're going to be in breakout rooms for 10 minutes, or we're going to be in breakout rooms for 15 minutes. I didn't tell you guys that, but that's, you know, that's a way to kind of work around helping kids kind of wrap it up. And so that they know the time limit. Do I have any volunteers to share from their group that you appointed as spokesperson? I can, breakout rooms are assigned like 1, 2, and 3, but not everyone knows that. So I'll just go ahead and ask somebody to speak up.
Yes, I can.
Okay, great,
I
Joseph.
was nominated by Cindy. She voted me in. So, okay, we discussed almost all the panels and the 4 areas. So limit the chat in terms of the chat room being overrun by student chat sidebar conversation. We can limit the chat to the teacher only. The one colleague said, you know, we can just set it up as students can only talk to the teacher. And also the breakout room, you know, one teacher used saying the breakout room was used for 30-second sidebar conversation to tell the individual student regarding addressing the behavioral issue and come right back in to the room at large. And also the other question was, we were discussing that one teacher had an experience of a student that brought in her pets every day, cats and dogs, and introducing to her. So after several times, and she sort of talked to her in a good manner, saying, we like your pets, but we have a limited amount of time. So that will be the the way to address that. In terms of spamming, name changing, there is an option to turn that function off to change the name, like a student's name changing, you can turn that off. And also, Cindy said that, you know, the public chat is a privilege rather than a right. So also, she suggested that you change the child's name to a teacher's pet. That might
Yes.
help. That was very creative, you know, Cindy. And also, in terms of like a really big time spamming in the chat room, I have passed to shut off the chat altogether, take it away, then then turn it back on. Then a couple times that the rest of the class will tell the spammer, if you continue to do that, none of us will be able to use it. So that usually takes care of it.
Yeah.
So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joseph. And I wanted to point out, there will be issues where students will want to share their pets. I would suggest maybe at the beginning of the year as a getting to know you activity, if you have students at home, you might say, today is share your pet day. We're going to take some time for you guys to introduce your pet to us, to kind of get it out of their system and to just, you know, do a getting to know you, share, kind of a show and tell almost, so you can have them already do that and not feel that like need to do that. And that's just a strategy for the beginning of the year. But unfortunately, guys, I have one more thing that I'd like to do with you. So Joseph, you are the spokesperson for all of us today, because I won't be able to have other teachers speak on there. But I hope you guys had some great conversation and just were able to talk more about specific situations. And again, I am going to, after I show you one video, I am going to post a question link for you guys if you have any questions at all today that weren't answered, because an hour simply is not enough to go over every classroom management tool, but it is enough to get us started. And the management team would love to, get back with you and help you. But I couldn't go without showing you guys a video that actually Cindy Ivy is the lead of. And so I'm going to be sharing this with you today as a way to add a little bit of humor to the craziness of classroom management. And so I have this reminder. You'll have to forgive me. I forget things if I don't have them right in front of me. So I had to say on this slide to go to a different slide. But this is a very dramatized video of issues that will come up in your classroom at some point this year. Okay, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Now, hopefully they do not come up all at the same time, as in Cindy Ivy's class, but hopefully it makes you laugh a little bit. It helps you to realize that we are all kind of on the same page in the virtual learning, and that there are so many valuable teachers and vice principals that are here to help with that. So today is not the end of classroom management tools. There we'll be discussing and learning and talking much more about it as the year goes on. And so I just want to thank you guys. I'm going to show this video, and then I'll come back with one more slide for you all. Let me know if you guys can't hear it.
This is going to be your worst nightmare. What do you do with the bad kids? I've got our home office team. Make sure you share the sound when you share.
That's what I was going to ask. Hold on. Let me share the sound.
It's a good reminder for all. All right, so we've got a lot of feedback over here, so I'm just going to mute.
Hold on, I'm going to start over because I didn't.
So for your warm up, I want you to do you think is all right? Everybody free. This is going to be your worst nightmare. What do you do with the bad kids? I've got our home office team here helping me be bad kids, so you can see how you handle it at PLI. All right, let's resume. Unfreeze. All right, so we've got a lot of feedback over here, so I'm just going to mute. And I'll let you have a chance to unmute yourself if you have something important to say. But if you abuse the privilege, then I'm going to take that privilege away. So keep in mind. All right, so I took the privilege away. I muted everybody. All right, so today in our class, what we're talking about is the preciseness of a measurement. So I want to know if you see the most precise measurement here. Can you put a letter in the chat? Now I see that some people are very excited about chatting with me, and so I'm going to make it where I use these little 3 dots here. Now everybody can only chat to the host. That's me. Marcy, can you make that me really quick? So right now, whatever you chat is only going to the host. That's the teacher. So that's the only person that can see what you're doing. Now it got a lot quieter in the chat room for everybody else. So anybody who's actually paying attention can tell me in the chat, what do you think the right answer is? Right? A, B, C, or D? Okay. Now I see that some people are a little bit off task here. So let me fix this right here. Okay. Please keep things classroom appropriate. Appropriate. All right. If you choose to take your name off of the list, guess what? Then I'm going to rename you something like teacher's pet. And eventually I might have to remove you because being in the classroom here is a privilege. Same thing with your video. If you're not going to use it appropriately, I'm going to turn it off. Okay? So now, Miss Alicia, would you like to correct your name? Because I can see that you turned your name to something inappropriate. Would you like to correct that now? Yeah, I can see you because on my screen, I have it set up where I can see all my students. I'm gonna let you unmute and tell me, what do you think the right answer is? Okay? Do you think it's A, B, C, or D, Alicia?
A.
Right. Okay, so that's a really good guess. I'm super proud of you. All right, and I think that you actually are almost right too. A for Alicia, right? That's a good choice. It's the second most precise number. There's one number that's more precise. Can anybody guess what that number is? Huh? All right. Now, if you're noticing over in my chat, somebody is privately messaging me and they're upset that the class can't see it. But you know what? I can tune them out because nobody else can see their business, right? And you know what? Now I'm going to be focusing in on my good kids. Who's paying attention and who wants to learn? I'm going to focus in on those kids, right? Hey, Mike, and I see that you want to answer. So can you tell me which one you think is the most precise? B. B is a great guess, and you're super close. We're getting warmer. It's not B. Does anybody else have a guess? All right, I see in the chat that lots of you have private messaged me and you have it right. C is the answer. Good job. Okay, we're gonna go on to our lesson now and we're gonna talk about why is C the right answer. Thanks for sticking with me. This is how we manage a crazy class at PLI. You're not responsible for their bad behavior. You just turn it off and focus in on the instruction with the kids who are there to learn. All right, you will not be held accountable for their behavior, and you don't have to worry about not being physically present in the room to make them behave. The TA can do the things like writing them up and sending them to in-school and all that jazz. But when you see the kids that are locked and loaded to learn, those are the kids we want to focus in on. We don't want to bail on those kids. All right, so that's how we do it here at PLI, and we're super excited to have you on board with us.
Okay, so I hope that you found a little laughter in that and know that it's going to happen to all of us. I learned through trial and error, and when I started in the middle of the year, I didn't have these meetings where I was set up to know all of these things right away. I just had to practice, and I know that you've learned so much, especially if you've been here the last couple of years. But sometimes all the stuff we learn, we come to the first day of school and then we almost forget it all, or we freeze, or we need to look through our notes and fumble. So I just want you to know we're all in this together. I hope to be able to speak more on classroom management. This is really a passion of mine. I could speak longer, but we only have 55 minutes today. So if you have any further questions, guys, I'm going to highlight this link and put it in the chat. Feel free to put that in there and someone will definitely answer you. But I wanted to leave you with this quote today before we sign off. It is, classroom management is not about having the right rules, it's about having the right relationships. So if I can offer any piece of advice to you to start this year, is relationships are everything when it comes to virtual teaching, where it's even harder, but just all around engagement with students. And so you'll have a lot less behavior issues if you spend time at the beginning of the year developing those relationships. So I want to thank you guys for coming today. I'm going to put this in the chat, this link, and feel free to stay on if you have a couple more questions. I'm going to be here. I'll stay signed on here for a few more minutes, but I want to thank you so much today for coming, and have a great rest of your week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Thank
Gina.
you.
Thanks.
Gina,
Thanks for
can
coming
I ask
today.
you a question?
Absolutely.
And did you put it already in the chat, or you're going to send us through the proxy?
So I just sent the link. I thought I just sent, I just sent it to one person. That's something else that sometimes you have to watch out for, is sometimes the chat will just have one person's name and you have to make sure it's set to everybody. But here it is for you guys. I just put it in the chat.
Thank you. And then I have another question for you.
Yeah.
If you are teaching higher level student, like in middle school and high school, my fear is they may not even show up. They may show up, but they mute themselves and they don't want anybody to see the picture, and you don't know if they are sitting and listening or they are doing something else.
Mm-hmm. I've definitely had that before. I had a student last year, a couple that just never ever signed in ever. Typically, there's a lot more to the story that we don't know about. And so that's about communicating with your TA regularly. Your TA documents that, and then also communicating with whoever your CSS person is that's kind of assigned with overseeing your school. It's important to keep in communication with them and just letting them know that this is happening, because some of that is going to be out of your control if you never even have a chance of reaching them.
Okay, and especially with this COVID, if they are not going to school, it's getting harder. The situation will be much harder.
Absolutely. It absolutely is. And we know that, and every classroom is going to be dealing with situations where that's happening. So just keep in communication with, and your VP. They'll be able to give you some suggestions.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Yep. Thank
Have a
you.
wonderful day. Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Eleanor.